I recently got this Zoom live track to replace my large main mixer. And in today's video, I'm going to go through how I use it, and especially show how I use it with Eurorack, because it can actually take Eurorack levels directly into the mixer. As always, if you want to leave me any questions down below, I love hearing from people and try to answer them. And if you feel like it, I would appreciate if you wanted to support the channel by subscribing to my Patreon. You'll find the link down below as well. All right, let's get into it. I will add that I bought this myself because I wanted to get it. It wasn't sent to me. Zoom's got nothing to do with this video, so this is completely my own opinion on things. And you'll notice straight away that I'm using it to record this video because I have my microphone plugged in here. And the advantage with this is I can now set everything up here to patch in, record, and multi-track record over this USB cable back into my DAW. So I have this right now going over into my Mac on the other side of the room using a USB cable where I'm recording into Logic. Okay, so what do we have in the live track? Well, it's a very straightforward mixer. It's, quite compact, quite light, easy to throw in your backpack. It can be USB powered here, or you can get a USB power port here. I've just been powering it off this front port, which doubles up as the interface, so it's working out well. It's also battery powered. You can put AA batteries in it. Haven't tried that really very much because, for me, it's always on my desktop. We have two XLR inputs, which can also be line level. I'm using one of them for the microphone I'm using, and it has phantom power too. We've got a stereo pair here, which you can also switch to dual mono by tapping that switch. And we've got two more stereos channels here, which can act as the USB return channels. So if you want to send audio from your computer back into the mixer to listen out on your headphones or on your speakers, you tap that button. Now, what that means is you lose the inputs on this channel. You won't be able to get any audio input if you're routing the audio from your computer to here. You'll notice it doesn't have any faders. It's quite a small unit, so they just use these knobs here. They're pretty easy to turn. They're not like loose or anything, so it doesn't feel too plasticky or anything. It's very easy to choose what each of the channels are doing because you press these buttons and then you use the knob to change that parameter. So to change the levels, this is the amount that channel is sending onto the master bus. So the levels will be here, the pan amount. There's an internal effects here. We'll get to that in a minute. And we've got two aux sends, aux 1 and aux 2. They're mono sends. There are no aux returns, so you got to use up some of your channels to do the aux returns. I guess that's a compromise in a small mixer like this. Plus, we've got a little EQ here. It's fine. Allows you to do a little bit of cleanup. The built-in effects are okay. If you need some reverb on something or a touch of delay, which we'll play with in a second, it does the job. One of the nice features it has is you can record up to 4 sound pads. Now, there's an app on the computer. You can also load up audio files in here, like if you were a podcaster and this was your channel ident or something like that, you could use that. But I've been using it for like little fill transitions for performing with. So you could use these as sort of fills if you're performing with this while you set up the rest of your patch. Let's take a listen. You just tap the button, turn up the level. Here's something I recorded earlier. You can layer them. And these are just sending onto the master bus here. So directly sending the recording onto the master bus. Here's another one that I recorded. More of a drum-based one. And you just tap it to stop it playing. We've got 3 scenes we can store, and very nicely we have an audio recorder. Tap record, it starts recording everything. Multi-track recorders onto the SD card, including the master channel. So you get the master stereo plus individual tracks all recorded here on the SD card, as well as being sent on the output here. Now, one of the big things Zoom was pushing in its advertising for the live track was this 32-bit float technology. So they use 32 bits in the audio to digital converters. They claim it gives more headroom. And I figured the best way to find out if it gives more headroom is to throw some Eurorack drums into this. So I've got my little mini drum kit set up here. We're also going to use the Zoya as a sound effect on the aux, and we're going to build out a techno patch. Right, the first thing you're going to say to yourself is, well, that's all well and good. You can have a mixer, but like, how are you going to patch in your 3.5mm Eurorack outputs into a 1/4-inch jack? So I had these already, actually. I had bought these for use on my other mixer. They're just very simple 3.5mm to TRS adapters, and they work very nicely. So let's plug the drums in here. We'll have our drums coming out of there. So I just plugged that in there. I've plugged this in here. Let's see if it works. And it does. Now we're getting very hot levels in on my mixer. Just looking over there at my screen, it's pretty much hitting it maxed out. Now remember, we have no gain control here. It's a very simple mixer. There's no gain control on the channel, so I can't turn down the gain on this to compensate like I would on my other mixer board. All right, the last piece of the puzzle is we want to use the Zoya for some texturing. So I'm going to patch in the aux end 1 over here, and I'll patch back in to this channel here for the return. We've got our channel set up okay, but what I want to be able to do is kind of perform with this. And I want to use, for example, the effects return and potentially also the levels of this kind of texture coming back off the Zoya. We have everything set up. We've it all wired the way we like. Now I'm switching over to record onto the master track. So we're now going to listen to the master output in the audio you hear in the video, which is the final mix down of everything that you're hearing here in the mixer, including the effects and the send off to the Zoya. So let's take a listen to the drum. Now, first of all, we got to bring up the level onto the channel the drum is on, because that is how much it's sending onto the master bus. Now I can adjust the master bus level here with the red knob. Probably just keep it just below peaking on the -6 level there. Okay, now let's bring in a few more drum sounds. Again, we're going to bring up their levels, keeping an eye on our level meter over here. We don't want to overdo it. So say I wanted to send the hi-hat sound here on this channel, this blue cable here. I wanted to send that into the built-in echo delay. So we go over to EFX, I dial up the send level here, and we'll set the return amount here. It's a little hard to see with the blue knob, but I've set it to about, 4 o'clock on the dial there. That is the return level of the internal effects unit onto the master bus, because remember, we're master bus mixing now. So let's take a listen. Of course, I could tap tempo in a new tempo. I like that. Say I want to send this off to the Zoya. So it's coming in on this channel here. The Zoya is on aux end 1. So we go over here to aux 1 and we set the send level. And then if I hit play, we see here on the screen we're getting signal in. I can adjust the send level so we get a nice amount of signal going in there. Don't want that peaking out. We don't want that going too high. Now we come back around and we're not hearing that because the Zoya is returning on this channel. So we can dial up the level. There we go. Lovely. Adding a little bit of texture to it. And now we can have a little bit of fun kind of performing, if you will. And off we go. Let's say I wanted to experiment with the EQ, the built-in EQ, and use that to maybe cut the low end out, like we try and do a drop or, build up to a drop. Let's see how we could do that. So again, we go into low. Now, in this case, the way the knobs behave is they add or subtract. So for example, let's just take the kick drum. We'll mute out the others here. So if I'm in the low on the EQ, if I do this, that's not the kick, this is the kick. There you go, I'm pulling the low end out of the kick, and now I'm blowing the low end out up off the charts on the kick. As I showed you before with the sound pads here, you're able to record and play back different things. Now, if I hit record on the sound pad at the same time, I'm going to record everything we're doing on the master bus into that sound pad. Now, if I want to play back what I had on the sound pad, I can tap it, which starts playing it back onto the master bus. I bring up the level, the return level. Now this is going straight onto the master output. As I said, it's not returning back into the EQ or anything. So we're sending that straight back onto the master output. I just press the pad to stop playing. So like if I had to go off and set up some different things over here on the patch, this would be a great way to do it. Now, you can't change the parameters of the delays or the echoes or the reverb decay times. You can't change that on the device itself. You have to go into the Zoom app, and then you can use the Zoom app to change all of those different parameters, because that's what it just gets set once and it's configured that one time. Playing around with the controls on the live track for any sort of live performance is going to be a bit fiddly and probably not ideal if you're under pressure or moving a lot of things at once. So let's look at how we can MIDI map some of the controls on this using an external MIDI controller. And you notice there's a MIDI in and out port here, a TRS MIDI in and out port. And I'm just going to plug in my Fader Fox MX12 controller here. Now, this is total overkill, right? The MX12 is a very, very solid MIDI controller. To use it with something like this, probably a little bit of overkill, but you get the general idea. So what I've done here is I've mapped the send levels onto the master bus to these faders, and then the effects send levels to these faders, and I've got some the low cut onto these knobs up here, and I've got some of the channels mapped to the aux1 send out to the Zoya over here on these knobs. And it's a pretty straightforward job. It receives on a fixed channel. You can change all this on the Zoom configuration utility. You can also change whichever CCs you want this to respond to. I just map this to the defaults, but you can change that to map to whatever you want on your particular MIDI controller. So if we just go into levels here and take a look, as I move the slider, you can see now the light moves on the ring. Much more straightforward to see where we are. Same with the effects send levels. Here is the send for that channel. I'm not going to send the kick to any of the effects. For this channel, that's the level there on channel 6. Same with this channel, and then this channel as well. And if we go over here to the aux1 channel, I've got this here is the knob controlling the aux1 send just on channel 6, because that's the only one I want to send. Because I'm going to use the Pony VCO over here in my modular rack as a sort of an acid line. So let's take a listen. We'll start this playing. We can't hear anything right now. Now, we're only going to listen to the master track. So we're just recording the master track, and obviously my voiceover is part of it. And the master track contains the final mix down of everything here. So this will be the ultimate, like what you would hear out of these if you had these hooked up to speakers in a club. So we'll bring up that. Now we can hear that oscillator. I can start sending it out to the Zoya, you see over here on the screen. I'll bring up the level for the Zoya return, which is this channel here, these white cables. That's Zoya return there. Now I can also send, I also mapped that oscillator to the internal delay. So we got a lot going on now. Bring in some drums. Okay, now we're going somewhere. Okay, that was fun. A lot easier to do. Like there's my low cut, for example, on the drums, where I can boost that bass. Now that was easy enough to do because you could go in and do it on your controller or do it on the Zoom app itself. Naturally, if you want to save these, you can save them to scene. So if I long press, say, C there, it saves all of those settings to scene C, so I can recall it later. One of the nice things about the scenes is you could have different phases of your performance saved into these A, B, and C scenes and just jump between them. So if you are changing things and mess it up and want to go back to where you were, just tap the button and it reloads the scene. A few other things we have talked about, or haven't talked about, I should say. There's this compressor button here that kind of boosts the output. So we just take a listen. So the difference on the master now, without and with the compressor. We can also change this to be, say, a room effect. And we get a nice room reverb going on. Finally, we haven't talked about the recorder here and how the internal SD card works. And it's very straightforward. If you want to record something, you just tap the record button here. So I'm recording now whatever we play, and that includes all of the channels here. And then to finish recording, just press the record button, and if you press play, it plays back the last recording. Well, pros and cons. Pros, obviously, it's small, quite lightweight, easy to throw in a backpack. I could see myself taking this to Super Booth, for example, and using it with a microphone for doing recordings, like interviews with people, because it's powered by AA batteries, or you can USB power it, and because it has the built-in SD card. Don't have to worry about carrying around a voice recorder. It's pretty simple to set up. I didn't really have to read the manual very much to figure out how to use it. I've got a bit of experience using mixers and other gear, but it was fairly straightforward to get going with it. Having the two aux ends are nice. Pity they didn't have a return. And having these 4 sound pads is actually quite handy, because you can actually set up kind of breaks and loops between phases of a performance. Having 3 scenes is also very nice, again, for moving between phases of a performance. Or what I do is I have this scene C here for my desktop recording setup, and scene A over at my main desk when I'm mixing. The little knobs are actually quite straightforward to turn. They're not slippy, they're not loose, they don't wobble. They're actually very substantial. I like the lighted ring. Some cons are things I think they could improve. It'd be nice if these little LED strips defaulted back to showing incoming levels after you've set a value on them. That'd be actually really useful. Also, I mentioned we don't have any way to aux return. I mean, it would have made the mixer bigger. You'd probably have to go up to a bigger mixer model to get that. So you're going to chew up a few channels using that. Similarly with the USB returns here, if you turn them on, you lose those channels as inputs. Bit of a disappointment, but I guess what can you do? One big one for me is the fact that the sound pads send direct onto the master bus. You can't route them into the effects or EQ or anything like that. And also they record direct off the master bus. So again, you can't record a specific channel and then loop it. So you couldn't do sound looping, for example, between different pads and like do looped layering of things. I would like if we could also set the USB recording to be pre or post fader and EQ. Right now, there is only direct as you record in onto the USB. There's no EQ, there's no level fading set to it. So whatever's coming in the channel is recorded straight onto the USB or the SD card. It would be nice if that could be set to pre or post fader, as you typically find in a mixer. Hopefully that's a firmware change that can be done. And finally, as I did mention in the video, there's no gain on the channels. Yes, we do have a level, but that's just the send onto the master bus. If there's a way that we could perhaps use these knobs here as gain controls, I don't know if that's possible on this implement, on the firmware and the hardware they have here, but that would be really good, especially if you're sending Eurorack levels directly into it. Other than that though, this is now my default mixer. It's going to be what I have on my desk from now on, and what I'm going to be using in videos. Very simple to use with just one USB-C cable. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Again, if you want more from me, don't forget to join the channel by subscribing. And indeed, if you'd like more in-depth insights, consider joining my Patreon. The link is down below.